Okay, so in this episode of Cloud Gaming Notes, we're going to be talking all about how you can get into gaming regardless of your background. Stay tuned for more. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington, and here we talk about all things cloud. Now, thank you for joining. This is the latest in our Cloud Gaming Notes. This is episode number 8. So thank you for sticking with it. I hope you've been enjoying the series, and we've got some more awesome content for you here today. So as you heard in the intro there, regardless of your background, whether you've been in game development for some time, whether you've, like me, maybe not a game developer, but you're really interested in the space. Maybe you're a gamer and you want to maybe dip your toe in the water, do a little bit more. Where'd you get started? How'd you actually get going with that? That's what we're going to be talking about in this episode of Cloud Gaming Notes here today. We have an awesome guest who we'll introduce in a moment. But of course, before you do, my normal request, if you like the content, please hit that like button. Please subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know as soon as there is brand new content for you to go and look at and consume as well. So with that, we're going to go and introduce our guest for the show here. Pleased to say we've got LaBrina Loving. Let's go and meet her. Hey LaBrina, how are we?
Hey, how are you, Chris?
I'm doing well, thank you, doing well. I do have to say, after however many takes of getting that intro, we got there. I'm
Yeah.
surprised you didn't let out a big yay, the amount of failed attempts that we had. But we're here, we're now recording, we are introduced, and we're set off. So glad to have you
It
with
was
me.
it was worth the wait. It was totally worth it.
Exactly. Because it's worth the wait because we've got you here. So thank you so much for joining. So I guess maybe to start off with, probably introductions. I know we've worked together in the past, so I definitely know you. But for the folks listening in, who are you?
Yeah. So hello everyone. I currently work at Microsoft. I work as a in developer advocacy for our gaming ecosystem organization. And that is really a long way of saying that I want to help game developers love Azure. So that's the short version of that. I have been in and around tech for 20 years now, so quite a while. Mainly always focused on the Microsoft stack. So I've sort of journeyed, I've seen sort of the evolution of Microsoft products. So I started out as a .NET developer. I went on and did a lot of work around SharePoint and Dynamics. I've been actually working in Azure since 2010.
Right.
So literally since the product since we were officially cloud. And so I've worked in and around Azure since it started. Worked around SharePoint, worked around Dynamics, and then now I'm back focusing a lot on Azure. And I've been at Microsoft for 5 years. I just celebrated my 5 year
Ah,
anniversary. So
awesome. So you'll
yeah,
get
so
your
just I just hit the send. Yeah, I got the
yeah,
little. I have my crystal coming. It hasn't come yet, but I get my crystal, so that's
awesome.
exciting.
Well, congratulations. That's awesome, awesome milestone. And
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for everything you've done. Really great work getting there.
Yes.
So, one question before we kind of move on here. So, you mentioned you've done .NET, you've done SharePoint, I think Dynamics, and of course Azure as well. Was Silverlight in there at any point, maybe, for example? Or
Yes, I do have some Silverlight scars
there we go.
still back there. Yeah. So I've done Silverlight, I've done a lot of stuff with WPF.
hmm
So there's like this meme where they say like if you are familiar with these like terms from the 80s, then like you should probably check your knees or something because you're middle aged. And so it's the same thing. If you're familiar, if Silverlight or like WPF or things like BizTalk are familiar to you, then you have been in tech a really long time. And thank you for your service.
Well, I love the kind of intake of breath as I asked the question as well, and that told me everything. I was like, I
Yeah.
know the answer before you even say yes. Awesome. No, love it.
Yes.
Love it. So I guess then one of the things we should maybe explore first is you've got this awesome developer background there from everything we've heard. And really focused around .NET is kind of what I'm hearing from that introduction. Has that always been in gaming? Has it gaming been a new thing? Talk to us a bit about, I guess, where that passion for gaming has come from, perhaps.
Yeah, so I have not really been in gaming for a very long time. It's something that I sort of was around and the scene game development.
Mhm.
I actually really started getting exposed to Unity really because I wanted to dabble a little bit into mixed reality
Mhm.
and VR. So I did a little bit of that a few years ago and started getting exposed to that. But my background has really been all around enterprise development, so helping large organizations, with digital transformation, with just with like tech enablement and consulting in that manner. So really I've been focused on enterprise development, and game development has kind of just been something in sort of a passion off to the
Mhm.
side. But so not really something I've made a full-time job until now. So
Gotcha. But that's awesome, right? I suspect many of the listeners and viewers of this particular channel are probably going to be in the same boat because they're wanting to learn cloud and understand Azure and other cloud technologies for their work day to day, whether they're building that enterprise retail application or back end office suite or whatever it may be, right? They're probably
yeah.
using the cloud from that perspective. But it's great to hear that we're able to use some of those skills and transition into maybe this area that is sometimes perceived to be a little bit sexier, a little bit more interesting in the gaming space, right? So
Yeah. Mhm.
well, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's very interesting to now enter into game development and talk cloud with game developers because I think it's a great time because
Mm.
it's the same feeling that I actually got when I first joined Microsoft and I was working with customers in government and retail because they were sort of just starting their journey into cloud. It was interesting. I sort of missed the time earlier on where we had to convince customers that cloud was great. I started right when I think most enterprise customers were convinced that
Hmm.
cloud is directionally where they wanted to go, and it started moving workloads to from on-prem to cloud, but it was more how do we get there?
Yeah.
And so I think we're at a point now, especially with game developers and with game studios, where this is a good time because I think game studios are starting to realize the power of cloud and the importance of it. I think but they're still fair. A lot of game studios, it's still a fairly new voyage. So I'm excited to sort of introduce cloud to kind of a new group and sort of talk about the benefits of cloud. So it's an exciting time.
It, I could not agree more. I think with some of the other sessions we've had in this series, like when we start exploring, I guess, current state of the world and looking at
Hmm.
some of those things that maybe you and I would take for basics from a cloud perspective with scaling out and some of the benefits we get, etc. Some of that is still not quite realized, and you can kind of see that when you start looking at how some games are made, having dedicated servers that you still need to connect to, or all of these types of concepts, as opposed to maybe having a service that you kind of pay for with a subscription or something like that.
Hmm.
And it's almost like that software as a service or gaming as a service, I guess, is the term we're starting to hear come through now, isn't it? So
Yeah.
interesting times ahead. I think the one, and I'm going to fanboy here now. here we go. But the one that always stands out for me is a really shining example. I know it's a Microsoft title, but anyway, is Sea of Thieves, because
Yes.
what it does, the way that it's delivered as a game is just amazing. I think it's 3 or 4 years old now, 3 years old,
Yeah, I think it's
and
like 3 years old. Mhm.
yeah, and you look at the game where it was and where it is now, and the whole load of functionality that's now out as a result. And I guess earlier this year they had the big announcement, of course, partnering with Disney, with Pirates of the
Yep.
Caribbean, and
Yes.
there's not many games. I guess Grand Theft Auto maybe is a similar one, Grand Theft Auto 5, with their
Mhm.
online services. But there's not many games that deliver in that way, where they deliver the game and then you see the game still running many, many years later with
Mhm.
live services.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think the reason why they see if these was super successful is because they're leveraging cloud and they're able to iterate faster.
Mm.
They're able to because they're able to iterate faster on their game and get title and get fresh content out faster.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's a big challenge for gaming, right? It's if you think about an enterprise. I have to go. Let's take my banking app, right? If I if I want to transfer money, I have to use that banking app.
Mhm.
And whether they add new features or not, I'm going to continue to use it because I need to transfer money. I need to do things with my bank. Like
Mhm.
there's not going to be a time where I will say, that app's boring. I'm just going to stop using it, right?
Yep.
Versus in gaming, that happens all the time. So game developers and game studios have a unique challenge in the fact that they have to constantly iterate and push fresh content out or else their game kind of like dies, right? So
Mhm.
how do you do that? And delivering content for a game is super hard. And so how do you do that? How do you keep up with the pace? How do you do all those cycles of testing and things like that? And that's where I think cloud really helps because you can push out changes quickly. You can scale up and scale down to meet demand. All the things that we think about for cloud really ring true in gaming, especially. But it's still kind of a very kind of new concept of some of those benefits.
No, I completely hear you. I think the thing that stands out for me in what you said is almost that DevOps element of this idea of, hey, if I release a version of my app onto the App Store, many app stores available, of course, whichever one you choose. But if I release a new version which has a ton of bugs in it, and if I am an entertainment application, because I guess that's really what we're talking about here,
Right.
you're probably going to be losing people because, oh, there's 10 other, if we're talking games, there's 10 other shooter
Yeah.
games or driving games or whatever game you want to talk about there. um there's loads of other games that I can go and download, so actually, I'm good,
Yeah,
thanks.
I'll just move on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if I just exhaust on levels or content,
Mm.
right? Like my favorite like casual game on my phone is this like bubble game
Hmm.
or whatever. And they had like a small time where they ran out of levels. And I actually was like, oh, and what did I immediately do? I was like, I'll just go to another game. And so then they sent out a push notification like 2 weeks later and was like, oh, okay, we have new levels, we have new content coming out. But what if they didn't do
Yeah.
that? So I would just be a player that was lost forever
Hmm.
and I wouldn't come back. So or like even and I'm kind of a nicer gamer. What if I was like, oh well, I'm already moved on to the next thing, so I'm done. And then you kind of like lose play game players, and then yeah, your game's kind of done. And that's sort of a typical problem in gaming.
And this is something that Lee and I have spoken about before on the channel, is this idea of community. in gaming.
Mhm.
And I think before we've talked about the positive side of community, building that community, it makes games really sticky, etc. But I guess what we're implying there is also the opposite side of the coin, where if you're not giving enough to that community and to that game, there's potentially that negative side, and you might get, not all communities are great, right? You might get some of those on the extreme end who then
Mhm.
start spreading negative sentiments about the game as well, right? And that causes people to leave the game. So
Yeah,
having
for
that
sure.
constant stream of entertainment and what's the word I'm looking for? I guess just investment in the game, I
Yeah,
suppose, is
engagement,
critical.
engagement. Yeah.
Great word.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. That's definitely super important. It's just like we're all livers of social media and the world today, right? So this is just an extension of that, right? The way that you've been so successful in building followers on your YouTube channel is because there's content every week, and we look forward to it. And I'm like, I want to know when there's more content. But if you pushed out content every 3 months, well then, like,
Yep, exactly.
we're less engaged, we're less implied. Or if you push out something 3 months, then 2 weeks, then
Yeah.
yeah, like you have to. It's all about, so entertainment industry and gaming is no different. It's all about building a following, a community of people that want to stay engaged. And
Mm.
there's new things for them to do. Like there's always something new for them to try, or they're just there because I think that's what you and Lee were talking about. All my friends are there.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
then but then also, if one of my friends decides to leave, then all of
Right.
my friends, same thing, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
And it's interesting, something you said about like my own channel there that
yeah,
rung inside my head was this idea of we're all creatures of habit as well. Like
yeah.
deliberately on a Sunday, I'll do my weekly vlog. On a Friday, I'll release my kind of, you know, main episode for the week kind of thing. Wednesdays will probably be another form of episode, typically, if I have one that week. And that's just a regular schedule that I do because we are all creatures of habit. And whether you realize it or not,
Hmm.
you kind of subtly wait for that day of the week and you go, oh, there's the content. Oh, there's the thing. Oh, there's my
Right.
latest drop. And to use Sea of Thieves again as another great example,
Yeah.
and I guess other games like Fortnite, and I think there are many others. My brain has paused for a
No,
moment,
no, it's all right. Yeah.
but this season's idea. And this season's
Hmm.
idea is a great way of injecting content because it's predictable. A season lasts however many months or weeks or whatever, and then at the end of the next season there's a new theme, there's a new set of swag and drops and everything else that comes out, and it keeps you energized and engaged. And guess what? We're humans, we're predictable, and we know, okay,
Yeah.
at
You
the end of this
stay.
thing, there's something coming.
Exactly, exactly. And I think but that's a difficult thing. Like, you just imagine, um and we see, I think, that's a huge effort
Mm.
to have that kind of rigor, and constantly releasing content. That's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So the larger game studios obviously can do it with ease because they have tons of people. But how do you do that if you're kind of a smaller game studio?
Yep.
And I think it's the same thing that in my previous role when I was working with startups and ISVs. Like, how do you get that same kind of process down and things like that when you're a game studio of like 4 people? Like, it's super easy when you're a well, it's easier when you're a game studio of like 100 developers.
Yep.
But when you're a game studio of 2 or 3 developers, how do you do that? How do you kind of keep that consistency? And we all know, like, being being kind of in a startup mode, sometimes you cut some corners and you do some things. I can't imagine, like, there's so many times when in my old role where I was talking with startups and I would ask them like basic questions like, hey, like, how are you deploying code? And then like they kind of hang their head and they go,
Yeah.
well, you probably don't want to know.
Let's just skip past that question. You know
And
the answer. Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah,
probably don't want to
yeah.
answer that question, but that's okay. Like we all have to start somewhere. But I think those are the things. The sooner that you get into good habits for deploying and not having every deployment be kind of this Herculean manual process, the faster you can do. And I think there's ways that we can, cloud and just kind of fundamentals can help really any sort of game studio
Yeah,
or development organization of any size. So I think that that's important.
100%. And I guess to really start peeling the onion layers away, I guess we've been talking about cloud broadly, and of course, there's Azure. There's great services available on there, whether it's looking at the PaaS services or looking at Cosmos DB or some of those other things. But there's also a really awesome service from Microsoft as well. I know I'd be biased a little bit saying that, but I think it is really great. Is Playfab, and
Yep.
it just makes it super easy for game developers to come along and use cloud inside of their games.
Yeah, so it's super easy. So for those who don't know, Playfab is a managed service that's just recently, well, it got acquired a couple years ago by Microsoft, and now is part of our Azure family. And basically a lot. It gives you the ability to build a lot of the key kind of online services like leaderboards and chats. It does some analytics for you and a lot of other services, authorization. There's a ton and growing. So it gives you the opportunity to have all these services, but they're built out in a way that really just through a lot of simple configuration, you and a small amount of code, you can actually get a game up and running super quickly with a lot of those features that I just talked about. And then you can extend even more with Azure. So one of the things I like to talk about is Playfab has something called PlayStream events. So it
Mhm.
basically can collect like a lot of events and telemetry about your game. So
Mhm.
who's logging in, where they're logging in from, what kind of things they're doing within your game, and you could customize that a lot. And it collects all of that data in sort of an interface, and you can use Azure Data Explorer. It stores all that in Azure Data Explorer for you, and you can go in and do KQL queries on
Mhm.
that data and build your own reports. But let's say that you wanted to stream that data into something else and do more, or combine that data with other data stores and build your own like crazy cool reports. So you could extend that. So you could take those events and stream them to like an event hub and then use some streaming, either like Databricks, or you can use something like Stream Analytics to take and then actually have and then stream that to Power BI,
Mhm.
and you could have like a real-time report. So I love Playfab in the sense that it gives you a great kind of managed service that's simple to use and easy. And then you can kind of start there. And then as you get more comfortable and want to do more, you can extend it with other Azure services.
And I think the way I think about it in my head is it's absolutely that service which is there to accelerate your journey into
Oh,
cloud, and for the 80% of the things you need to do, it might work really well. And it might be that 20% where maybe you need to go and use custom cloud services. I say custom, you know what I mean, not Playfab in that sense there.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, for
and
sure.
that's absolutely fine, or even if it was the other way around. But it's there to help accelerate as much as it can enable you. And I think that's the difference if we're thinking back to maybe you and I and our backgrounds from the enterprise space. It's the difference of rolling your own identity store and implementing that and having those SQL databases and those things, as opposed to using something like Azure ADB to see. It's there, it's ready made. We just use the SDKs or whatever configuration we
Yeah,
need to do, inject it into our app, and we're done. And it's that kind of analogy, isn't it?
exactly.
Nice.
Correct. That's absolutely right. So it's a very easy service to get started. You basically can all like you'll have all these services already ready made. You put that in your code and you're done. And then you can helps you focus more on actually building the actual game and less on oh, how do I do leaderboards? How do I do matchmaking? How do
Right.
I do multiplayer server hosting?
Right.
That I can just, we can check that off the box
Right.
and check that off the list and focus on other things. Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
this is the thing when you really start breaking down that problem, like let's just take leaderboard as an example, because it sounds so easy, right? You've just got a list of players, their scores. What's so complicated about that, right? But when you really start
Right.
breaking it down, hold on, you've got a list of players, fine. How are they kind of being total by what? Is it by like kills? Is it by laps? Is it by points that you're doing in the game? And when you want to analyze that and look at stats per player, how do you give that experience to players so they can really start being competitive and building that community and that idea of, oh, my stats for this, what are yours? And just creating
Right.
that sense of achievement. And then there's achievements that naturally go alongside it. And it really starts bubbling
Yep.
out before you even think about the core
And,
game.
and and doing that in scale, right? So it's
Right.
not just, sure, if I'm just playing a game, if I wanted a game with like 10 people and in the US, great.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about creating a game with leaderboards for millions of players across the world.
Yep.
And updating and synchronizing that data and managing all of that. I mean, it's a pretty big task. So having that, being able to just say, hey, here's how I want to plug this into plugging this right into my code and just kind of configuring it is super, super helpful.
And important to say as well, because you mentioned about the global scale of that, not just building it and architecting it and developing it, but operating it too. Now, who
Mm,
who
absolutely.
wants to do that if you've got this awesome service that can do it all for you and you don't really have to worry about as much as the underlying plumbing? I mean, I'm sold.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, for me, I mean, especially too, for me learning. It's been
Hmm.
a great way for me to learn about gaming
Hmm.
without having to pick up so many uh, skills. Should I
Hmm.
say right off the gate or right out of the gate, right? So what I've been doing
Hmm.
to sort of teach myself, there's some great sort of self-starting games in Unity tutorials, and I've done so they kind of give you how to get started with the game itself,
Hmm.
but then I could also so then it's like, oh, I can add leaderboards to this game and just plug that in with Playfab, and then like I've done, or I can add authentication
Right.
and I'm done. So I've sort of taken, so what I'm working on now is I'm kind of taking a kind of a silly like tutorial from Unity. It's like a Space Invaders type game, but
Hmm.
Um, it's actually Raccoon Invaders. That's
Okay.
it's the sort of cloud advocate
Oh, the bits.
raccoons, if
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
seen
yeah.
them.
I know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So they're like basically you can kill them. So,
Oh
but yeah,
no.
so I'm actually so
Needs to come with a
so
health warning ahead of time, for anyone who
I
loves. In
know
fact,
it's so sad,
we can't talk
but
about it because he's sat right there. He's
oh,
on
I
the
know.
wall.
All right,
He's got to
cover your
cover his ears.
ears.
Oh, I love it. And just to pick up on another point, actually, there as well. Uh, you've mentioned Unity a couple of times, and there's of course another very common engine that is used in the industry, which is Unreal Engine, of course, as well. But both of those actually have SDKs for Playfab.
Correct, correct. So Playfab has, if you're using Unity or Unreal, there's an SDK there.
Mm.
There's also a bunch of SDK wrappers for different languages.
Hmm.
So whether you're doing C Sharp or C, and it's evolving. So what's been great about Playfab is that the Playfab community keeps evolving and adding sort of different languages. There's one for JavaScript. So it actually was interesting because there's one for JavaScript, and I just saw that someone created a wrapper for Dino. So if you're if you love Dino there and you love and you want to use it for with Playfab, like there's a wrapper. So it is very nice that it's been super well received by the community,
Mm.
and the community, there's a lot of good community contributions happening
Awesome.
as well.
So there we go. Lots of potential for open source and people who are enthusiastic
Correct.
wanting to get involved. Awesome. Love that.
Just in time for Hacktoberfest. So
Very true. I think by the time this goes out, we'll be right in it.
yeah.
So definitely a good shout out actually for that for anyone who's listening in here. A good reminder because I almost forgot about that,
Mhm.
but we are only a few days away.
Yeah, yeah,
Good.
for sure.
So then I'm really intrigued about the experience with the game you've been making so far and the leaderboards and everything else. What I guess when we're developers and we're making stuff, there's always a moment that stands out when you're like, I got it. This is awesome. Oh, this is really cool. That kind of shining moment of,
Yeah.
oh, I made this thing now.
Yeah.
What has been that moment so far for you when working with the game?
I think so. What's really kind of tripped me up, and it's funny because my husband, I always tease my stepdaughter, and my husband always tease me because I love math.
Okay.
And I always was like a big like nerdy like math and science student, and in school, and I tout that. But there's actually in gaming. Um, there's a lot of kind of math and physics involved, right? So when you're thinking, so it's not just, this, like in my Space Invaders game, like this, when the enemy spawns and you're trying to move it, like it has to
Yeah.
move and it has to fall at certain positions and things like that. So sort of figuring out all of that
Uh-huh.
has been like a little bit of a challenge because which is a lot more involved than just you know like writing code for building like a web form and saving it to a database or something like that, right? There is like because the fields don't fall off the page or
Right, right.
anything like that. So that's been a bit of a challenge, but I think I'm starting to get the hang of that piece and
Nice.
figuring out that. So that yeah, so that's been good and it's funny, yeah, like I get to, say I used actual math and physics in my work. So
Yeah.
yeah, that part's been fun.
You just reminded me of a excuse me, a talk that I watched. Must have been a couple of weeks. I think it was before I went on vacation, and it was at one of the games conferences, maybe Gamescom or Game Dev or another. And it was
Mhm.
this whole talk on statistics, and they were talking about where effectively proving whether they should invest in feature A or feature B and how they make tweaks to features
Mm,
inside of games. And I loved statistics when I studied it. I mean, I don't use it these
yeah,
days anymore, unfortunately, as much as I could or should, but it really brought me back and just got me thinking, like, wow, I never realized, even just in terms of deciding, do we want to go with back to what we were talking about earlier and making content statistically, do I want to go for this or this, and what will give me the most gain from a user perspective and engagement
that's
with the
cool.
platform and everything. I'll send you a link separately. I'll see if I can take it out. It was an interesting
Yeah,
thing.
that sounds like, yeah, if you can remember, I'd love to see that. That's
Yeah,
actually good. Yeah, I'm always excited
yeah.
to see things like that. And I think it's like super interesting. Yeah, I'd love to see that.
The other one I saw recently that stands out, and again, I'm going to mention that game again. It's Sea of Thieves. I'm the biggest fan ever, I know. Um,
Nice.
is and I think this was from a few years ago. They were doing like this talk on testing within games, and they were talking about like unit tests
Mm.
versus integration tests, etc. Um, and they
Oh,
were
cool.
talking about how they effectively shift left for their game development and test some of the features and functionality. Like if you steer the wheel, does the wheel actually update in game that amount? And you know my background, right? I love DevOps. I love that type of stuff, and it just blew my
Nice.
mind. I was like, "This is awesome!" Like I was really enthusiastic. And to come back to your original point, there really is something different, isn't there? Like with a
Yeah.
game where you can actually see that space invader or bit invader or raccoon invader moving or seeing that wheel turn or whatever that is. There's something different as opposed to I've wired up this form to put data to that database. I don't quite know what it is, but there's a bit of a shot of adrenaline or something that goes, or
Yeah.
dopamine, I should say. Dopamine is the one. Where it's like, that's cool. I just made that thing.
Yeah. Like you're literally making things kind of leap off the page.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that part is super cool. I love the idea. Yeah, again, I'd love to see that
Mm.
testing because I think that's so one of the things that's been fun about this role is I've kind of been on a little bit of a listening tour
Mm.
as part of kind of getting up to speed. So I've had a chance to just talk to a lot of different game studios and gamers and game developers and you know out there and that's been one of the biggest so one of the things I kind of always ask them is like what are some of their biggest challenges and you know and just sort of asking like hey if there was anything that you think cloud could help
Mm.
and testing is always number one on the list because if you think about just all like how much work is involved in testing a game. And then not just testing the game, but testing it across, you know, different platforms. If you're running, like, there's just a Herculean amount of work that's involved in that. And so I think that's been like the number one um, point of discussion is just, you know, or challenge that most games that all game studios have is just around just testing their game.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to see. I'm trying to, and so that's one of the things I'm kind of like learning a lot more about is just what that process is and how that looks. And so that's been interesting too. But yeah, that's been a big request, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I'm literally just trying to search for it now, but I might have to get back to you because my YouTube search history is so long, way too long. I
Yeah,
think that says a
yeah.
lot more about me.
I go to yeah. I'm definitely YouTube's. I go to YouTube University pretty much so
Exactly,
every day. So
exactly. There we go. I have found it, so I will send that to you. But
perfect.
no, this has been awesome. I think to wrap us up, maybe something which would be nice to end on is maybe sharing a couple of the standout moments or top tips or thoughts that really shine out because you've been on this journey kind of living and breathing the transition from I guess enterprise dev if we want to call it that way into focusing more on the game development side. And if anyone's going on that journey and thinking, right, I want to do this journey too. This talk has really made me think, right, I want to try this out. Even if I make my own little game and I don't do anything else, I just want to try it. What are maybe some of your top tips?
So I think that for me, a couple of the top tips is just like understanding the the couple of the key differences in gaming versus enterprise development, and those are basically just how much how important latency is, and also just in sort of enterprise development where we're developing web applications. Typically, we're always dealing with like TCP IP connections or TCP connections, whereas in gaming, you're usually dealing with UDP connections and sockets. So just sort of recognizing some of the key differences in development, because I think I sort of took for granted, like, hey, development is development is development. Like it's all like ones and zeros, but there are some key differences. I think recognizing that early on is definitely key. I think also, but I also think on the other part is it is code. So, even though you might feel like it's so drastically different, I think there's more commonality than there are differences. There's a few key, but there's more commonality. So sort of trust your just kind of software development background and your kind of foundation and principles. And I think that'll carry you on like a long way. So it kind of makes it feel a little less intimidating to start, because it's like, it's the same thing. This is I can take the same things that I learned as a web developer and apply that to gaming. So I think those are kind of the key like tips for me.
Nice. And it's nice to hear you say about the latency piece and not getting too overwhelmed or drawn in too quickly, because that is exactly one of the scenarios that always scares me. Is like, if I'm a player, I shoot a bullet, but there's another player over here, but then there's lag, and then they change. And going back to your maths point, right? All the maths, and then I don't know. That's kind of my brain.
Yeah,
so.
it gets a little bit, but I think once you kind of, there's a little bit of learning that piece. That takes a little bit, but I think once you get it, it's there. And like I said, I think applying the skills that you have is really super important.
Awesome. Excellent. No, great session, LaBrina. Glad to have you on. And I think once
Thank
you've
you.
got a bit further with the game and you've got it developed and your leaderboards, you'll have to come back on and show us and maybe
For
take us on a bit of a
sure.
tour. That would be cool.
Yeah, for sure. We'll love to do that.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for joining. Really great insights, and looking forward to having you back on the show at some point.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. Always a big fan of what you're doing, so I'm super glad to be on the show.
Appreciate it. Thanks, LaBrina.
Okay. Okay. All right. Take care.
So there we go, folks. We've been talking all about getting into game development, no matter what your background. And you can see there about both myself and LaBrina talking about our more enterprise development focused background. And LaBrina's already certainly ahead of me in mine, but I'm certainly inspired to go and get my first steps on making a game. I've just got to find that one idea. So ideas in the comments maybe, unless you've got your own game ideas that you're working on, in which case don't tell me, make it yourself. So folks, otherwise, you know the deal. Please hit the like button, please hit subscribe, please hit the notification bell, not just on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and cloudwithchris.com as well, where you can go and listen to the episode and read the transcript in real time as well if you like. So otherwise, as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and until the next one, thank you for tuning in, and bye for now.